Hello and welcome. This is a reading vlog for a very special book we have here. I would love to do a reread vlog, but I just do not have the time right now. So I am I'm very excited for this vlog because we are going to read the new Hunger Games book. I am so excited. So I'm going to prep and we'll go through this whole process together because I'm going to prep by watching the movies, and me and my friend are supposed to rewatch the movies soon, and it depends on her timeline. But if she can't watch it when I need to, like by the time I need to watch it, then I'll watch it on my own, but we'll be like yapping about it. And if she chooses to, I'll like have some of our yaps on this vlog too. My friends and I love the Hunger Games, and like even though I don't think we were like very close at the point where we were both like super into it, we still are, but like when I first got into it, one of the things we've bonded over is our love of the Hunger Games. I've mentioned this before on my channel, but like when Songbirds the movie came out, because we were not in the same state, we decided to go to the theater at about the same time, and once the movie was over, I called them and we were like so excited, and we were basically dissecting the movie and whatever. I am so excited to read this one, and I'm even more excited because I feel like generally from what I've been hearing, more people seem to have good reactions towards this book than they did when Ballads came out. So I'm hoping that's a good sign that like it's a good book and there's a lot to be said here. One of my favorite things about the Hunger Games series and the books is that it always feels like Suzanne Collins is like trying to communicate something to the reader. It's not spoon-fed to you, like you have to think about it and be like, whoa, this is crazy, but it's there, and it's so enjoyable to like read through and figure out what's happening, but also figure out the message that's coming through. So I'm so excited. We're gonna take off the cover together because I've been meaning to take off the cover and like set it aside because I'm officially going to start reading it. I'm hoping it is Thursday, but I'm hoping to watch the movies by this weekend and then start reading it. Honestly, I wish that it had come out like before my spring break because I could have read it during spring break, but also my spring break ended up being like unexpectedly busy, so I guess it kind of worked out. Anyway, we're going to read these. We're gonna watch the movies together. Well, we're not gonna watch the movies together, but like I'm going to watch the movies. You should watch the movies too. Honestly, they're really good book to film adaptations. My friends and I were talking about it, but we're gonna take off the cover. I think this is the only book, by the way, that I've ever bought on release day. Like on the day that it got out, like it came out, I bought this book. And I don't think I've ever done that before. Like I'm 99% sure I've never done that before. So this is her, or this is she. You know what's funny? I just read All My Rage and the cover was also purple for that one. Look at that. I'm trying not to freak out because I'm so excited. I'm so excited. Let's read it together. Excited to take you guys along with me and like just generally document this because this is super fun for me if you didn't realize. Bakery today, and they had Totoro shaped pastries. And I'm gonna take my first bite. I really didn't want to eat it because it's so cute, but me and my friends are about to watch Catching Fire now, and I made myself some chai latte. So good. So let's take a bite out of Totoro. Oh no, not Totoro. Hello again. It's been my chair is very old, so it keeps like spinning. It doesn't just stay in place. If you see me like holding this, it's because my chair is trying to turn me the other way. It's been a minute since I last recorded / checked in about Sunrise on the Reaping. I've been kind of like hesitant to start because I'm in the middle of reading a couple of other books, or I was in the middle of reading a couple of other books. I was waiting till I finished those. I'm almost done with 1984, the vlog that's coming out before this one. I'm about to start reading. Before we go further in, I just want to say this is going to probably be very spoilery. I don't know how it's going to pan out because knowing me, there's a good chance that I'll be like up reading until like midnight in the dark, and obviously I can't like record. It's not obvious. I could record myself, but I'm probably not because I like to be like laying in bed, no scarf on, reading. We'll see how what happens. I actually got a skip the line library loan on Libby as well, so I have a copy of it on my Kindle, and I'm gonna predominantly use my Kindle to read just because I think that's going to be easier. And also I like being able to see the little percentages at the bottom. Oh my god, this is not related for this vlog, but I just got the Dream Thieves and I'm literally dying inside to start from my library. Okay, so Sunrise on the Reaping. Let us read the first line together. I already looked at the what's it called, the little like not epithets, is it epithets, the little like quotes at the beginning, as you can see. But let's read the George Orwell quote. Especially it's very fitting because I just literally am about to finish 1984. All propaganda is lies, even when one is telling the truth. I don't think this matters so long as one knows what one is doing and why. George Orwell, Part 1. I'm so excited. I love this series so much because I think that like, yes, I'm attached to it because I read it at such a young age and it was so transformative to me because I was just like, oh my god, books are so good. I was always a reader, but like the Hunger Games later in my life, after I kind of fell out with reading for a little bit, reignited my love for reading and movies and just story. But I also just love this because it has so much fodder for conversation and dissection and like essay writing, just so many things, and so many things that are unfortunately very relevant. I'm like so excited to read this. My friend said that she just started reading it and I was like begging her not that she would, but I was like, please don't give me spoilers. And every time I see an edit or like something Hunger Games, specifically Sunrise on the Reaping related, on like Instagram Reels or TikTok, I freak out and I like scroll past. So I want to be freed from the prison of my own fears in regards to spoilers. So first line, happy birthday, Hamish. I can't sit down and read right this second because I have a couple things that I need to do before I can like settle down and read. I'm gonna try to read a bunch today after I get like a few other things done. Okay, so I'm at 79%, like an hour and a half-ish left of the book, Sunrise on the Reaping. It's been so insane so far, and I'm going to make the second part of this video. I'm still considering making it 2 different parts, where one is like the analysis and the other one is the thing, or if like I'll just have my sit down be a lot longer than usual, because there's so much in here that I could talk about and I've been talking about with my friend. So let's just try to finish it tonight. I think I can finish it tonight. I made myself some tea and I'm going to light my candle. So let me actually do that. Let me turn this off. But I have this Kindle and they don't have it anymore, so I can't really replace it once it's finished, but whatever. It's a wood wick, so you'll hear it in a second. Finally finished Sunrise on the Reaping. I actually finished it a couple days ago and was just taking some time to organize my notes and transfer my tabs and stuff from my Kindle to the physical book, especially because I wanted to like reference it and stuff. So I wrote a bunch of notes, and I realized really early on that this vlog was just going to be not like very incomplete because I just needed to read the story, and I was trying to focus more on like the story and just highlight things that came to my attention as I was reading rather than just analyze it, because like for my first time reading it, I wanted to be paying attention to the story as well as like the messaging that, again, like I pick up on like when I'm not trying to analyze. It was really hard not to try to analyze though. I want to talk through like 3 of the main themes that I picked up on when I was reading this. There are definitely other things that like I want to talk about so bad, and I'll try to see if they organically come up while I'm discussing like my 3 main points, because I think they're super relevant, but like we'll get to that. There are 3 things that I want to specifically talk about, which the first is implicit compliance, because that's a huge idea in this. The second is dehumanization. Again, very relevant, very much applicable. And the third one, which is like I think the most obvious point of the book, if not all of them being obvious, but like the number 1 thing is propaganda. So I'm gonna leave that to the last because I think that the first 2 kind of tie in perfectly to like the propaganda point. Although, I mean, I guess you could go about it the other way. But we're gonna go through 3 of those points and then any other things that I picked up on that I really want to talk about. Let's start with implicit compliance. So the whole idea of like implicit compliance and implicit submission is that like even if you're in a situation, or like the people in the districts, for example, they're in a situation that they don't like, that they're not comfortable with, that they're not okay with, that's like really harmful to them, but they still partake in it, and they still, by virtue of not refusing to engage, is this idea that they are still involved in giving permission for it to happen. So the first part, and like there's gonna be certain scenes that I focus on with all of these because like it does come up throughout the novel, but there's like specific scenes where this comes up the most directly. The first being chapter 8, page 103 and 104. So like literally end of chapter 7 and beginning of chapter 8. As you can see, like I highlighted all that. But basically like Haymitch actually first realizes that they outnumber them. So the outnumbering thing is one idea, but then there's also this idea of like, okay, well, if we have strength and right now that strength is in numbers, then why are we complying anyway? Haymitch has this moment on page 103. There's this moment just as I get to my feet where I look around and I'm armed and they're armed. A half dozen of us hold sleek, deadly knives, and I see that there aren't many peacekeepers here today. Not really. We outnumber them 4 to 1. The more I think it over, the more my dismay grows. Every year we let them herd us into their killing machine. Every year they pay no price for the slaughter. We could have at least done some damage, I tell Regina. At least a little, possibly a considerable amount, someone says behind me. I turn to see Plutarch. He waves his camera crew over to record the knife training, but his attention stays on me. The question is, why didn't you? That's like the number 1, like that's the first thing is like, okay, so why didn't they attack when they had the strength in numbers and when they were in the position of power at that point in time? So then the next page, why do we let the capital brutes rule us? Because we're cowards? Because we're stupid? Why do you submit to it all? He presses. Because you have the guns, Regina says flatly. Is it really about the weapons though? I grant you they're an advantage. On the other hand, when you consider the sheer difference in numbers, district to capital, Plutarch muses. Yes, we far outnumber the peacekeepers in 12. I think about the weapons we could lay our hands on: pickaxes, knives, possibly some explosives. But in the face of automatic rifles, aerial bombings, gases, and the capital's menagerie of mutts, I don't think we submit, I say. It's implied. You accept the capital's conditions. Because we don't want to end up dead, I snap. Do you really not see that? No, I do. I see the hangings and the shootings and the starvation and the Hunger Games. I do, Plutarch says. And yet, I still don't think the fear they inspire justifies this arrangement we've all entered into. Do you? We stare at him. He's not taunting or mocking us. He's genuinely asking, why do you agree to it? Why do I? For that matter, why have people always agreed to it? When we don't respond, he shrugs. Well, it's something to think about. At this point in time, Plutarch is straight up asking them, like, why are you guys going along with this? Why aren't you guys resisting? It's such an interesting idea, right? In this moment, they have the advantage of like numbers and possibly weapons because they have the weapons in their hands, like Hamish kind of points out. But like beyond that, what Plutarch is asking, what is it that's leading you to comply and agree to, essentially, without agreeing, but agreeing without agreeing in action to like the circumstances that you're all in? And this made me think kind of like of the origins of power specifically, because it's completely correct that in this context the districts outnumber the capital, right? But clearly the power isn't just in the numbers, because if it was in the numbers, then why wouldn't they? Like, clearly they could have stopped it, right? There is something beyond the idea of like there's more of us than there are of them. It also begs the question of where is that power? But also, like, is it in weapons? Is it in numbers? And like, what is going to lead a group of people in the districts, for example, to rebel even if they are at a disadvantage, which is literally what Plutarch's asking. I think like one thing that it made me think about, because like even Hamish is like dealing with this question of like, yeah, why do I keep complying? Why do I keep complying? And I think he kind of gets his question answered towards the end when he realizes that like he is in danger of losing not just like his friends, his family, like his material positions, but his life too, right? And at a certain point in time when he thinks that he's going to be dying, like in the thing, and he views that as like, okay, if all I'm going to lose is my life and my family members and my love are not going to suffer, then I'm willing to take the risks. But the moment that he realizes Snow is literally holding his family and his friends and like everything he cares about over him and saying like, if you don't listen, we're going to destroy them, he starts submitting. Like he literally says, after he's become the victor, he goes from like not being like, I'm not going to implicitly submit anymore while he's in the games when he thinks that he's going to die, to on page 349, no greater suck up exists in the history of the games. No humiliation is beneath me. I will bear anything to keep my loved ones alive. And that's your answer, right? Is like when people view and like understand and feel that everything that they hold dear to them, and a lot of people, like even Hamish points this out too when he goes to like blow up the tank and he's like running out, and then suddenly he has this thought of like, I still want to survive if I can. Like there's something in a person that makes them want to live even if they've like tried to mentally prepare themselves for dying. People are implicitly submitting because it could be worse, is essentially like the way that they view it, is like it could be worse. These circumstances are so bad. Everyone's circumstances in the districts are so bad. And yet it could be worse. And that fear of it getting worse, and that fear of their loved ones suffering, and that fear of them and their loved ones losing the few material positions they have, and ultimately also losing your life, is just such a like scary thing that like nobody really wants to risk that, even if they're not satisfied with so many aspects of their life. And so like it is that fear factor. Related to that is like at the very end on page, I wrote my page numbers down so I wouldn't forget, page 379, at that point in time where like Hamish has lost literally everything and everyone, he tells Plutarch, he says, I have nothing to live for. I say this without even a note of self-pity. I am simply stating a fact. Then you have nothing to lose. That puts you in a position of power. At a point in time where he doesn't have anything, like this reminds me kind of Joanna in Catching Fire, and looks at the other tributes and is like, what, I have nothing like left that they can take away from me, like there's nothing that I care about. Like, that's such a huge thing, right? It's this idea of, it is fear. It's like you're afraid to lose the things that you do have, even though you know you have it bad, it could be worse. This all made me want to also think about like the effects of non-compliance, right? So when you have implicit submission and you're like, okay, I don't want to implicitly submit anymore, I don't want to comply anymore. I was really curious about this because it comes up a lot in this book, specifically with Haymitch in the games deciding that like I'm going to trying to ruin like everything as much as possible, as much as I can, for the game makers and for the capital and for the government, right? Another question that came up for me when I was reading this, when Haymitch does the different things that he does in the arena, blowing up the tank, right? Or when he tries to kind of like destroy the actual arena and it fails, he has this like point in time where he's like really freaking out and kind of not just freaking out, but he's kind of like feeling so dejected and just like a failure. The full force of my failure hits me. Who do I think I am? Why did I think I could change anything? That I could take on the capital with all its might and bring the Hunger Games to a standstill? Me, a 16-year-old kid from the trashiest district in Panem with little schooling and no outstanding skills. I've got nothing but a big mouth and an inflated sense of my own self-importance. All foam, no beer, that's me, near beer. Plutarch's words echo through my head, mocking me. No more implicit submission for you, Haymitch Abernathy. Blow that water tank sky high. The entire country needs you to. Well, bad call, Plutarch. Turns out I was built for implicit submission, head to toe, through and through, inside and out. It isn't enough, though. Just a minor disruption with no real consequences. Nothing I've done is enough. And I was just thinking about this because Haymitch, to start, like, we're seeing Haymitch trying to change things up, not entirely on his own, because he does have like the backing of like Beatty and Wyrus and Mags and all these people. And Plutarch. In this circumstance, like on his own, he's trying to get things done. It's a small group of people that are trying to change it. And in this instance, Haymitch specifically is the one person that's doing this, to like trying to change things, right? I was just wondering about like the material effects of non-compliance and whether the absence of those material effects renders it pointless. When he does all these things, he keeps going back and forth between like being really excited because he thinks he actually changed things, to being really frustrated because he's just like, I didn't do anything, it didn't work. But I think like one thing it did make me think about is like with Beatty and Wyrus and Mags and Plutarch and presumably a lot of other tributes and victors that tried to change things and maybe didn't immediately change things. I think the effect of that was also to show and to reveal to the people who are paying attention that there are a growing number of people who want to change things. And that in and of itself is a huge deal. Like it's a huge thing that's happening where people are identifying themselves as like, we're not okay with this, we're not happy with this, and we're willing to change it. And the other thing too that I thought about is like with Haymitch specifically in the games, like he thinks he's going to die. And even in that scenario, he realizes that it's not just about the things that he's able to change on his own, but it's also about like how he is able to aid other people. And so on page 261, after he feels like he's failed and wasn't able to change anything, he has this thought where he says, instead of giving up, maybe I'll see if I can't be of some tiny use to someone else. And I thought that was so remarkable, is that even if his individual action isn't what changed the course of everything, he was still recognizing that his role might just be to help someone else do what they collectively want to do. So there's so much more that I could talk about with the implicit compliance or the implicit submission, because I fully like highlighted so many different parts that are related to that. But I'm gonna move into also like the dehumanization. And with dehumanization, I also want to talk about humanization and representation, something that the tributes talk about a lot in this book, and specifically when they're having that conversation with Wyrus and Mags about like what they want out of the games, is this idea of like we want them to recognize us as humans. And Haymitch is actually the one who vocalizes this. So on page 96, they're talking about like the different things. I don't want my families to see me suffering, etc. And then and then this part happens. How do I say it when the capital might be watching? That I want to make the capital own what they're doing to us. I want to remind people I'm here because the capital won the war and thinks that 50 years later, This is a fair way to punish the districts, but I'd like them to consider that 50 years is enough. That sounded sufficiently diplomatic. I wait for them to laugh or roll their eyes, but no one does. So you want to make them end the Hunger Games for good. How? Asks Maisie. I don't know yet, I admit. I guess for starters, by reminding the audience that we're human beings. The way that they talk about us, piglets, beasts, they called my fingernails claws. You saw how those kids outside the gym looked at us, like they think of us as animals, and they think of themselves as superior. So it's okay to kill us, but the people in the Capitol aren't better than us, or smarter. If anything, they're stupider, says Maisie, who clearly doesn't give two hoots about the cameras. Look at the mess they made with our reaping, the chariot parade, or Wyrus's games last year. They couldn't even get her gifts to her. Show them something like that. Yeah, force them to admit we're people too, says Wyatt. And they're the beasts for killing us. That's what's so crazy is that so this is like the dehumanization, right? Or the humanization. It's more so humanization, but I think to understand why dehumanization is a process and a tactic is used and works successfully, we have to understand the effects of its absence, especially within the context of these books. And when I was thinking about it, there were two things that I was able to kind of come up with. I'm sure there's more than this, but these were the two things that came to my mind, which is that seeing the district as less than the capital and the capital citizens specifically accomplishes two things. The first is that it gives the capital citizens this illusion that what's happening to the districts is not going to happen to them. And so they therefore play into that because they don't want to realize that these are people and we're people, and what's happening to them could very easily happen to us. The second thing is that it's easier therefore to justify the district's mistreatment because it's seen as we need to keep them in line. They're not human enough, they're not smart enough, they're not conscious enough to be able to control themselves or to control themselves specifically from killing each other, right? And part of the whole idea of the games is that and Hamish talks about that too, is it almost in a sickening way seems to prove them right. And this comes up in ballads too. It seems to prove them right. Prove their suspicions right, because then the capital citizens, after or while they're watching the games, will turn to each other and be like, oh, well, did you see that? They're killing each other. They're barbaric, they're uncivilized. Even though it's they're not uncivilized, they're not barbaric. You're putting them in a situation where they have no choice. They're literally in a position where they kind of have to do it. But it does prove that, right? And therefore it's justified, and it's a cycle that feeds into each other. So the next question that comes up then is what would humanizing the tributes do? I think that it would, and the answer is kind of I think it's kind of self-evident, which is that if the capital citizens realize we are doing this to people who are just like us, they are literally humans like we are humans, then they realize that is inhumane. But how are you going to consider something inhumane if you don't even think that what you're doing is being done to humans or people, real conscious people just like you? And this is kind of a tangent, but not really. I just finished reading Everything is Tuberculosis by John Green. And in that book, he talks about the idea of people as statistics and how we should view them more in the lens that we view our own loved ones. And he basically says people are people, and yeah, that's a very obvious statement, but it's unless we see them in the same way that we see ourselves and our loved ones, we won't be infuriated with their mistreatment, because in our heads it's just they're just a concept, they're just oh, whatever. At the end of the day, by saying oh, it's just it's just a necessary part of life, unfortunately, wars are they're just unavoidable, or saying that health inequity is just so unavoidable. When you're doing that because you don't value their lives and their humanness and humanity as much as you're valuing yourself and your family. Because if that was to turn around on you, you would be upset about it and you wouldn't be happy with it. And this kind of reminds me also of a quote in Sunrise as well, where Hamish is talking to Wyatt, because Wyatt is talking about odds and stuff. Hamish literally says, Her body's not even cold, and he's reduced her to a number. But she was not a number. She was a little girl I met on the day she was born, when Mr. McCoy, his face alight with joy, held her up at the window for all of us kids to see. I think this like also shows us that humanization aspect too. It affects everyone, because like ultimately it's really hard to carry the knowledge of like every single human being that we are interacting with has like a story. And I know that sounds super hippie woo, but it's true. Until we realize that, we will continue to mistreat each other in small and large ways. Unless you realize that like they're just dealing with their own thing and they're a human being with feelings and emotions and things happening in their life, you are going to view them as an opponent. You're going to view them as a rival, and you're going to view them as not worthy of being treated in the way that like you would treat yourself or your family members or your loved ones. So I also bring up representation because like I have this conversation with my students a lot of times. Like every semester I have them read this article it's titled "We Need to Talk About Representation." I actually came across it because V.E. Schwab actually shared it on her stories like 3-4 years ago, and I read through it and I really enjoyed it. But I used that as a stepping stone to kind of ask my students like, why do you think it's so important for us to have representation? And throughout the conversation, I asked them to like really think about it, is why is there such an emphasis on representation? Why do people need to like see themselves represented in media? But also, why do we need to see other people represented in media? And we always come to this conclusion, which is that by seeing them in the media, by learning their stories, by interacting with them and connecting with them through books and through movies, and the huge amount of work that like books and story in any form does, is that it humanizes people that we do not know or we maybe have never met in our lives in a way that makes them more human to us. It just like allows us to see each other as humans. Like the easiest way that I can say it is that like, even I was thinking about this when we get to the part with the trees. So on page 314, chapter 23, end of chapter 23, when Welly and Hamish are in the trees and they're just like, you know, trying to sleep through the night, and then Hamish overhears Silka and she's against the tree too. I become intensely aware of the three of us huddled around this tree, the last trio of human heartbeats in the arena. Sad, desperate, but also a rare moment of district unity in the games. At this point in time, like as I was reading this part, it just made me pause, because I realized as much as like, and obviously there's a caveat here, but like as much as like we're reading these books for any book, but we're reading these books for the messaging and whatnot, there's a little part of us that wants like Silka to die, you know, and not because like, oh, we want this like child to die, but it's like, oh, we know that Silka needs to die so that Hamish will survive, right? But even that is just a result of not seeing Silka as a whole person, a child that is put in this impossible situation. And yeah, for narrative purposes and stuff, you do need her to die and whatever. But it just like this part gave me pause, because it reminded me like these are all children. And even as an aware reader, we are still engaging in that process of you know, finding reasons why Silka deserves to die, but Hamish doesn't. And there's a reason why that's happening. And I think that part of it is like dehumanization. It's the fact that we love Hamish because we're familiar with Hamish, because throughout the trilogy and throughout this book, we have been given reasons to see Hamish as more human, as more relatable, as like someone that we care about and we've invested our emotion and feelings into. Which then kind of leads me to my next one, which is the propaganda and the controlling of the narrative. And there's a few things that I want to talk about with this, because there's so much happening. And like, just to start, I just finished reading 1984, and it was so crazy having read that book and then reading this one, and even the fact that like there's literally a George Orwell quote at the beginning of this one here. And also like the arena being an eye was just, oh my goodness. Even Hamish is like, the symbolism is not lost on me. Like, at least we're self-aware. But like, Obviously, the idea of propaganda is huge in this book. It is huge in this book because from the very first, like from the very beginning on page 46 with Hamish's reaping, Hamish literally says, I watch, both fascinated and sickened by the flawless transition from Maisley's drawing to Wyatt's and mine. Not even a hint of Woodbine's shooting or the turmoil that followed. And there's my name, and there's me, and there's Ma gasping, Sid crying, Lenore Dove with her hand clasped over her mouth. That's not what happened, I say. And so, like, this is a huge, huge, huge part because throughout the entire thing, and this is tied to the dehumanization, we're literally seeing it happen in front of our, like, eyes, right? On page 49. Clearly, Plutarch wants to capture my delight so he can broadcast it all over Panem. Look how well the capital treats the tributes, how forgiving they are to their enemies, how superior they are to those district piglets in their stinkholes. It's so crazy because like you have the banners and the banners that are in the districts kind of trying to like remind the districts that we need the peacekeepers to be safe. We need President Snow to be stable, like have a stable society. And then when Hamish gets to the capital and he gets off the train, he notices that there's also banners there. No peace, no prosperity. No Hunger Games, no peace. It's the same campaign they used on our square back in District 12, but with slogans geared to the capital citizens. Seems the capital has to convince its own citizens too. Which is just such a crazy detail. I mean, it makes sense, right? Because like what's so fascinating is like the capital is convincing its own citizens, right? But it's also trying to convince districts, and the districts I think are less likely for it because of that humanization dehumanization factor. The districts are less likely to buy into that because they're feeling the ramifications of the games. And so when you're dealing with that harm and that like physical, like the physical material effects of the games, it's a lot harder to buy into that. Although some of the districts do buy into it, like for example, when on page 116, when Ampert and I think Regina are talking, when Hamish is talking to Ampert and Regina, Ampert literally says, for one thing, it means we haven't spent our whole lives buying into the games as something we aspire to. We're not collaborators, says Regina. Even some of the districts, the more wealthy districts, are buying into it, right? They're preparing their kids for the glory of winning the Hunger Games. It is working, but it's just so fascinating that it's happening on like it's happening to everyone. And probably the reason why it happens less in District 12 and the people of District 12 are less likely to buy into it is because they are feeling the ramifications over and over and over again. They are the most like disregarded district, as like Hamish literally points out. And there's just like, they're more aware of it because they're not being like, I think the propaganda is not being pushed on 12 as it is everyone and everywhere else. So like I want to talk about like propaganda in general too, because it really makes you think about like, or actually I can use the part where there are a lot of references throughout the entire book, right, where Hamish is like, I hope they'll show this on the camera. I wonder if they'll show this on the camera. And we don't entirely know like what is going to be shown on camera versus what isn't until the very end. And I think that's what's so insane is that like when we get to the end, so from page like 339 all the way until 346, the entire time that like the games are being replayed and Hamish is finally seeing like what is being shown versus what isn't. It's so telling that so much of what like the facts are being like what facts are being revealed and what facts are being concealed, right? I want to scream out the truth. A boy's head was blown off. People in 12 were shot. My reaping was rigged. But I just sit there, mute and radiating implicit submission. So again, the implicit submission. This is all the country saw anyway. You had to be there in person to know about the crashing chariots and me holding Snow accountable for Luella's death, which, as we know, also didn't happen because look, it's time for the interviews and all 48 tributes are in the house. Does anyone notice this besides me? Timelines are twisted, connections misleading. It's less flat out lying than lying by omission. And this is actually so funny because I had this conversation with my students like a couple of like maybe a week or something ago. And at one point I said something and my students seemed to like kind of not take it seriously because they're just like, oh my God, what is she saying? But I was asking them to consider, is it propaganda if you're being told the truth, but some facts are not being revealed while others are? And I wanted them to think about this, and I was asking them, like, would you consider it misinformation if you're given like 10 of the facts, but 3 of the facts are not there? Because propaganda isn't always outright lies and fabrications. In fact, it's easier if the propaganda is based on some sort of a truth and that truth is just misrepresented, it's twisted, like Hamish's games, right? He's literally saying like, yeah, all of these things happen, but they didn't happen in that order, or this also happened. Why aren't you showing that this happened too? Yeah, so I ask my students sometimes, like, how are you sure whether the information that you're being presented with is accurate or trustworthy? And they'll come back and tell me like, oh, well, if it's peer-reviewed or well-known or highly familiar, then we can know that the source is reliable. Then I ask them about the facts. What if in any given situation, facts are only being half represented? If you're only given half of the true picture, are you understanding the picture? And then in that, because like even like in that situation, like if someone asks Snow, like, are you guys lying? He could reasonably say, we're not lying. But it is lying by omission because you're not giving the full picture and people are not going to understand what happened without the full picture. Couldn't you argue that even though no lies are being told, withholding some facts and revealing others is a way of manipulating audience response? And this also reminds me of like 1984, because in 1984, Winston is constantly like feeling like he's going insane because he's like, is nobody else realizing that the facts are being changed up? And in that instance, it's like full fabrication. But is nobody else realizing that things aren't adding up? Does nobody else remember like what actually happened? And it's crazy because like Hamish literally says the same thing. Does no one remember? Do they just not care? Or during the games, did they show the audience a different sky or none at all? The game makers must have been scrambling like crazy to control the narrative by this point. Their lack of discernment transforms the recap, validating it as truth. I hope those in the districts can still see it as the piece of propaganda it is, but no telling what they've been fed. Which is, again, it's very tied to 1984, because in 1984, Winston is literally like, well, if every single person in Oceania believes what we're being told, then is it the truth, regardless of like any material or like knowledge that would prove it otherwise? And then finally, I mean, I referenced this already, but I just want to read it. When the camera pulls back to show the arena, it looks like a giant eye. The cornucopia marks the pupil. The wide circle of spring green meadow makes up the iris. On either side, the dark green of the forest and mountain terrain narrows to points, forming the whites of the eye. Well, the symbolism is lost on no one. Even the little kids in the scene know the capital powers are watching us. I wonder if they ever consider that we're watching them too. Which was just like, wow, crazy girl. That is so crazy. I jumped a lot. I know I jumped around a lot. There's just so much happening all at once. And like I said, like I like pointed out too, is like any one of these given quotes are dealing with like multiple things at the same time. So the propaganda and the implicit, like it all overlaps. The propaganda, the implicit submission, the controlling of the narrative, dehumanization, the humanization. But there's a couple things that I also noticed that I really wanted to pick up on and just like really briefly like talk about. So the one thing that I loved and that I was just like, I think it was only really brought up one time very briefly. The signals were going off in my brain. The idea that the heavens bees, and Plutarch is like the #1 like capital support of the rebellion, right? The idea that the heavens bees are the only ones who have a library, like insane. It was so crazy. So on page 121, when Hamish is taken to the Heavensbee mansion and they go into the library, Plutarch says, "Do you read, Hamish?" Plutarch asks. "I can read." "No, I meant, do you like to read?" "Depends on what." "I'm the same," says Plutarch. "Reading in general isn't a popular pastime in the capital. It's a shame. Everything you need to know about people is right here in this room." And this just was like literally just being like, reading is a tool for empathy. the reason, I think one of the reasons, I'm sure there's a lot of reasons and maybe I didn't pick up on all of them, but I do think that one of the main reasons why Plutarch Heavensbee is one of the few people who is on the side of the rebels and like wants things to change is because he's a reader, because he has empathy, because he doesn't see the districts as less than human. He understands, and he like, it's just so crazy. I have so many thoughts about reading and story and just the impact of engaging with books, but I think that it can go for like movies and stuff too, but I think books specifically, because not only do they, you know, give you the whole story and whatever, but they also, in a different way than, for example, music or other forms of art like film, it gives you the most room for imagination. And like, I don't know, I have to, these are half-baked thoughts a little bit, but it's so important, and it's so crazy that like just that one little part is like, it's so telling. It's so telling that the Capitol doesn't read. People in the Capitol do not read. That's all I'm going to say. I really love this. Like, look, it's so crazy. I enjoyed it so much because I just loved like dissecting the little messages and kind of like everything that's going on. There was another part that I thought was so insane the other thing that I want to say is like, even Effie's character, Effie is like the exemplification of the effects of propaganda, because we are seeing in her the effects of propaganda and like believing it, where Effie doesn't seem to love the games or anything like that, but she genuinely from the bottom of her heart believes that it's necessary. It's like a necessary evil almost. And she tells Haymitch and the other tributes like, you're so brave. It's almost like saying like, thank you for your service. Even though from the outside and from the district's point of view, it's just like, girl, like, what are you even saying right now? The other part that I wanted to bring out too, when Haymitch leaves Welly to go and he like leaves her to go do something, and then he hears the cannon so he runs back towards Welly. He sees Silka holding Welly's like head, like, which was so just insane. But Silka's holding Welly's head. Haymitch says, "What did you do?" Silka makes an effort to focus on me. She holds up Welly's head defensively. She attacked me. Now I notice the poisoned dart hanging harmlessly from Silka's blousy sleeve. Welly tried to protect herself. Page 323. I'm not even going to add to that. I just think we should pay attention to that part, because that was so insane. That was so insane. That was so insane. Welly trying to protect herself, and then Silka placing the blame on Welly and being like, oh, I just killed her because she was like attacking me. And then you see that Welly like literally didn't even cause any harm and was just trying to, it's just insane. I loved reading this. I feel like having read this one with the most attention out of all the books, I feel like I'm going to have to review the original trilogy and ballads and stuff. I mean, I've watched so many videos dissecting them, and I'll link a couple of them down below, because there's one creator, Emma, that does such a good job just doing a video essay on, so far I think she's done ballads. I'll link it down below so you guys can check those videos out, because I thought they were so well done. And yeah, I definitely recommend reading this. Hopefully if you've watched this far, you've read it, because I did go into spoiler territory. I think that it is so amazing that a book can provide equal emphasis on story and theme and messaging, because I do think a lot of books fall into either forsaking messaging for the story or forsaking the story for the messaging. And the second one really gets on my nerves more than the first, because I think that when you're presented with the story, you're still always going to be able to kind of think about like, why did this happen in the way it did? Why did this character behave in the way that they did? Whereas if you're just standing on a pulpit and just like trying to like teach people things without a effective story to back it up, it's just not successful. And I think that that's what this did so well. So yeah, thanks for listening to me yap. I had such a good time reading this, and I ended up realizing that like I needed to talk about it more than I needed to vlog it, if that makes sense. I don't know why I am enjoying doing that so much. It's so fun to yap about these things, and I'd love to hear from you guys if you've read Sunrise, what you thought about it. I don't know, did it make you think about a lot of things? Because it made me think about a lot of things. I mean, I was going crazy because I just felt like I didn't even know how to organize all my thoughts because I had so many. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here, and I hopefully will see you guys in another video very soon. Goodbye.